The stories that 1,000 people a day have, it's very interesting to see why people need money and why they come to the pawn shop.
The real-life pawn shop experience of American jewelry and loans was showcased in the reality TV show Hardcore Pawn, which enthralled viewers with its uncensored portrayal of the frantic world of pawnbroking. The show highlighted the daily struggles, high-stakes discussions, and family relationships of the Gold family set in the middle of Detroit. No one could have seen the impending tragedy that was happening just beyond the field of vision while the cameras rolled. A chain reaction of financial blunders, internal betrayals, and reckless agreements brought this once thriving corporation crashing down. Come with us as we investigate the reasons behind Hardcore Pawn's bankruptcy. Here we will quickly go over Hardcore Pawn's history before getting into the specifics of what led to company's bankruptcy. Hardcore Pawn, RDF USA, which was subsequently renamed Zodiac Media, and Richard Dominic Productions for Taru TV are the companies responsible for producing the American reality television series Hardcore Pawn. Located on 8 Mile Road in Detroit, Michigan, American Jewelry and Loan is a pawn store that is run by a family. The show chronicles the day-to-day activities of the business. Les Gold, a third-generation pawnbroker, is the proprietor of the company. His grandfather was the proprietor of Sam's Loans, which is located on Michigan Avenue in Detroit and has since gone down. In 1978, Les established American Jewelry in Oak Park, and shortly thereafter, in 1993, he moved the business to its current site, which served as the backdrop for the popular reality show. As they navigated the hurdles that the pawn shop presented, Les and his children, Seth and Ashley, who were also co-owners of the shop, were featured in the series with them. One of the difficulties they encountered was that clients frequently attempted to con them out of any money they had in their possession. "I have my shoes. I have my money. Don't bother with this nonsense." This guy was behaving like a complete and utter child. The customers who frequent pawn shops are often more unpredictable than those who frequent other types of retail outlets, as you are aware. On the other hand, were these desperate client scams on Hardcore Pawn the only cause for the company's failure to survive? Well, let's find out. Fraudulent customers. Pawn shops. Everyone in the company is aware that a large number of customers may be trying to sell stolen goods or even retrieve them without proper identification. People tried to get their hands on things that weren't rightfully pawned at Gold's pawn shop. As Les was informed by his music teacher, Vong, he learned that a student had pawned his beloved Fender guitar at American Jewelry without his knowledge or permission. When Vong confronted Les, he refused to follow protocol and insisted on getting his guitar back. Les maintained the shop's stance, disregarding Vong's emotional appeals and local celebrity. Vong would have to pay full price to buy the guitar again if the police couldn't prove theft. As Vong continued to protest about having to pay for his own instrument, Les stayed strong, and his irritation level rose. Security dragged Vong out of the building as the altercation progressed, and he never got to see his guitar again. A different client, Leon, and his Aunt Barbara stopped into Gold's pawn shop in need of a replacement remote control. The couple pretended to have repurchased their TV from a pawn shop rather than merely buying one. When the TV was resold, the original remote was nowhere to be found. So, they were hoping to get their money back. But there was a minor problem. They only had the TV's barcode, which obviously wasn't enough. When Seth demanded a receipt to prove the purchase, Barbara and Leon were hauled out of the store by security after an argument escalated from a simple purchase of a universal remote control. American Jewelry Pawn Shop was featured on Hardcore as they faced the difficult task of determining if a customer's property was stolen. An odd-haired teenage consumer created a bad impression while trying to con American Jewelry and Loan. Rich, who was already dubious, became much more so after hearing his tale of how he came to own the brand-new microphones he was peddling. Someone was quite unlikely to toss 2 fully functional mics into the crowd. The theft of the mics from a performance at a nearby bar the night before confirmed Rich's worst suspicions. The teen's failed attempt to generate quick cash led to the cops calling and arresting him. After coming dangerously close to buying stolen artwork in one episode, American Jewelry and Loan almost got themselves into a $1 million heist. Thankfully, the matter was resolved when the original owner contacted Les prior to any monetary transaction. The Golds later found out that the two art dealers had lied to them, saying that Les was a friend of the family who could provide them a great deal, even though they had never met him. An escrow account was funded with $425,000 as part of the arrangement, with additional funds to follow upon completion of the sale. In order for the original owner to get in touch with him, Les gave the burglars his phone number. It turned out that the robbers intended to pay the owner significantly less money than he anticipated, keeping the remainder for themselves. If Les hadn't decided to get in touch with the painting's original owner, their plan would have worked. As any viewer of Hardcore Pawn can tell you, receipts are required by American Jewelry and Loan whenever a customer comes in to redeem an item or lodge a complaint. When consumers claim to have never shopped at Gold Pawn Shop, it's usually because they never made a purchase. An interesting event occurred when a man tried to trick Rich into getting a new iPhone by saying his previous one was broken, even though he had bought it 2 days ago for $200. When the client made the bogus accusation that an innocent employee had sold him the faulty phone, Rich saw right through the con. Rich would not issue a replacement phone without the original receipt anyhow, and the staff verified he was unfamiliar with the client. The con artist's plot backfired, and the show's theatrical tone led to his dramatic ejection from the store. Two ladies tried to use a counterfeit pawn ticket at American Jewelry and Loan, adding insult to injury to dealing with clients who either didn't have or didn't remember to bring their own receipts. They planned to steal a $9,000 ring, but one employee saw through their ruse in no time. Both the employee and Les notified the women that the document was phony, and the women responded angrily. Rather than being upset over losing a priceless ring, they were more upset over their failed plan. Threatening and destructive customers. The bankruptcy of Hardcore Pawn was influenced by destructive consumers. A disgruntled customer entered American Jewelry during a regular episode, obviously agitated and demanding money in exchange for old TVs. His frustration increased as Seth and Les rejected his request. He reiterated his request in a more aggressive manner, insisting that he only desired a few dollars. However, Seth and Les remained uninterested. The customer's refusal to cease resulted in the hurling of objects, which caused damage to the store. He made grandiose assertions regarding his connections in Utah and accused the staff of encircling him. He became increasingly agitated as he complained about the mere desire for a few dollars and accused the employees of being unreasonable in their pursuit of him. Seth and Les maintained their composure in spite of his disruptive behavior and threats. Les categorically denied his demands and stipulated that he was not permitted to return. The man continued his tirade, presumably unaware of the store's security measures, unaffected. He cautioned the staff to maintain their composure and issued a threat of violence, asserting that he was never too elderly to defend himself. Nevertheless, his destructive actions were ultimately unsuccessful. Seth and Les were assured of their capacity to manage any potential issues, as they were aware of his license plate number and the presence of security cameras. They were aware that any additional actions he took would result in a negative outcome. Other destructive customer behavior that resulted from failed transactions was also demonstrated in Hardcore. When two erratic customers arrived at the store with the intention of selling a guitar for $200, Seth inquired about the cause for the sale. They clarified that the funds were required for a paternity DNA test. The circumstances were perplexing. Despite the fact that both men had slept with the same girl and she was now expectant, they were unaware of the identity of the father. Regrettably, Seth declined to acquire it upon realizing that it was of no value. Customers were enraged by this rejection, and they unloaded their frustration on Seth by shrieking and causing a disturbance. They were perplexed as to why Seth would not even provide them with a nominal sum for the dilapidated, unbranded guitar. They begged for a mere $20 as they were in dire straits. However, Seth maintained his resolve. Security intervention was necessary due to the escalation of the situation. In a final act of aggression, the customers took their guitar outside, smashed it, and threw the fragments around. Seth approached them, demanding that they clear up the mess, which only served to exacerbate the already tense situation. The two men, who were now completely incensed, declined to comply. Ultimately, these disruptive customers were permanently prohibited from entering the establishment. However, American Jewelry had not yet encountered the conclusion of destructive consumers. At the store, a customer inadvertently pushed over a lamp, which led to its destruction on a busy afternoon. Les promptly directed his blame toward him for the damage. However, the customer denied any liability. As accusations were exchanged, the situation was characterized by a whirlwind of confusion and frustration. The customer asserted that he observed an individual knock over the lamp while inspecting a settee. He had attempted to assist by picking up the lamp. Nevertheless, Les was resolute in his assertion that he was accountable for the damage and insisted that he be held accountable for the shattered lamp. The consumer insisted that he did not possess any money, and the atmosphere became increasingly tense as the dispute intensified. The customer's conduct became more unpredictable as the argument intensified. He commenced challenging Les, his words brimming with defiance and wrath. Seth determined that it was imperative to remove the agitated consumer from the premises in order to defuse the situation. Byron was assigned the responsibility of escorting the customer out of the establishment. He couldn't help but contemplate the numerous individuals he had encountered who had committed similarly absurd acts as he led the customer out. The customer required assistance, and it was evident that permitting him to remain in the store would only serve to exacerbate the predicament. Les faced a challenging situation in a subsequent episode when a consumer demanded a $25 refund. A tense atmosphere was soon established as the customer became aggressive and began shouting. Despite Les's efforts to soothe him, the customer persisted in his demand for a refund, yelling constantly. Les requested the receipt, stating that it was necessary for the exchange or refund. However, this only served to escalate the customer's animosity. The situation was further exacerbated by the customer's threat to leap over the counter. Les maintained his stance, asserting that he required the receipt to confirm the purchase. Les was unable to execute the refund as the customer acknowledged that he did not possess it. The customer refused to relent and demanded his money back immediately, despite Les's recommendation to bring the receipt to expedite the exchange. Ultimately, Les requested that the customer vacate the premises, as he was unable to continue to tolerate the customer's detrimental behavior and negative attitude. It was unexpected that destructive customers were not the most problematic consumers the pawnshop had encountered. A tense incident occurred at American Jewelry and Loan when a client became agitated and made death threats after discovering that his pawn transaction had expired. Les' frustration was rapidly intensified when the consumer began to shout at him. Security officers promptly intervened and escorted the irate customer out, during which time he issued the threats. Les underscored the critical nature of customer and employee safety, emphasizing that there would be no tolerance for such threats. In the presence of the police, the consumer apologized for his outburst after being removed from the premises. He clarified that his wrath was precipitated by the theft of his possessions and that his threats were merely an outburst of frustration. Les initially became incensed by the incident. However, he ultimately resolved to release the customer, acknowledging that his actions were the result of a moment of profound exasperation. Nevertheless, the security officer seriously considered the threat, underscoring the importance of preserving a secure and tranquil atmosphere within the store. The business was impacted by these destructive consumers, and the hardcore pawns rating was subsequently reduced, which ultimately led to the company's bankruptcy. Dealing with theft. Scams were an additional factor that contributed to the bankruptcy of hardcore pawns. Pawnbrokers were given a variety of sob stories to disseminate scams, including the funeral of a relative and unemployment, among others. While a few of the sob stories were authentic, the majority were wholly fabricated. Ashley was nearly deceived by a woman who claimed to be unemployed, recently divorced, and expecting another child in less than a month during a hardcore pawn episode. This woman evidently went all out with her narrative, as she not only convinced Ashley to sell her a $20 rocking horse for $5, but also received an offer to work at American Jewelry and Loan. Unfortunately, the con artist was unable to transport the rocking horse onto the truck because everything malfunctioned. The truck's door struck her baby bump, causing her supposed infant to drop out in the shop parking lot. The woman hurriedly entered the truck and drove off with an individual who appeared to be her spouse, deciding to flee. It was a dramatic conclusion to an almost successful scheme, illustrating the extent to which individuals would go to deceive others. An additional episode reveals an even more peculiar ruse perpetrated by a consumer. A customer's urgent murmur alerted Les to the presence of an individual concealed within the refrigerator. Despite his initial skepticism, Les decided to conduct an investigation and summoned Ashley. They cautiously opened the refrigerator door and, to their surprise, found a male curled up inside. Les murmured in disbelief as the intruder scrambled out, blinking in the sudden light. Ashley, with a voice that was a combination of wrath and confusion, demanded an explanation from the man. However, Les abruptly interrupted him, adamant about not allowing him to escape with such a brazen act. Les, who was extremely enraged, recalled anecdotes of individuals concealing themselves in cabinets or trunks to plunder stores after the store had closed. He questioned the individual about his intention to purchase the refrigerator. However, his response was unconvincing. The intruder's intention to conceal himself until after hours was excruciatingly apparent to all, as it was evident that he was lying. Les emphasized that the individual should have approached the refrigerator as a customer, rather than concealing himself within it. The intruder endeavored to alleviate the increasing tension, but Les's patience was fraying. He insisted that the individual depart immediately. Les issued a final warning as he approached, emphasizing that any additional defiance would not be tolerated. The intruder began to move toward the exit as he recognized the gravity of Les's tone. Les immediately instructed security to escort the individual out of the premises, thereby ensuring the safety of the store and its belongings, thereby reinforcing his commitment to vigilance in protecting his store. Les shook his head, still processing the peculiar incident. As the man was released, Les and his staff were left in a state of awe by the unprecedented encounter, which left a combination of disbelief and exhilaration in the air. It served as a stark reminder of the extent to which certain individuals would go to commit larceny. However, the most detrimental event was yet to transpire. The pawn store was the victim of a daring robbery in a dramatic turn of events. Two individuals stealthily breached the building by peeling back the roof. Their objective was to acquire a highly valued fur coat, which they promptly removed from the showroom before they fled. The security breach, which the monitoring company initially dismissed as a false alarm, caused Les, Ashley, and Seth to be disoriented. The intruder's agile movements through the internet room and onto the showroom floor were revealed as they promptly reviewed their security footage. Les and his team promptly established new security protocols upon acknowledging the severity of the breach. In order to prevent any future break-ins, they elected to enhance nocturnal vigilance by providing dedicated patrols around the parking lot. This served as a stark reminder of the necessity for effective security protocols. Betrayal from employees and embezzlement. Naturally, pawn shops are required to implement stringent safety precautions. On the other hand, it is not uncommon to come across a few wannabe thieves who are trying their luck every once in a while. On the other hand, instances in which your own employee is involved in theft are quite uncommon, particularly when you are the head of security. There is a good chance that many of you know Joel Big Joe Shannon, who made an appearance in the show's earlier seasons until being caught stealing on a hidden camera in the season 6 finale. Les made the decision to install a covert camera in order to capture the thief in the act. This decision was made in response to the mounting suspicions that numerous objects, including scrap gold from Seth's desk, might have been stolen. He used a diamond ring as bait and pointed the camera at it. When the ring vanished the following day, Les simply studied the tape to see what had happened. After Big Joe admitted his guilt and removed more than $7,000 worth of jewels from his pocket, the police were summoned, and he was hauled out of the store while being restrained in handcuffs amidst a dramatic scene. Ashley was so humiliated and ashamed that she was on the edge of crying when she yelled at him. While it is possible to believe that staff theft at a pawn shop is uncommon, it is important to note that Big Joe was not the only one who betrayed the gold in hardline pawn. Following the laundering of more than $1,000 from the jewelry counter, another member of the staff, Christina, was also taken out of the building in handcuffs. Tressa, Ashley's competitor, was also involved in the incident that occurred. Tressa was immediately caught taking items from the safe without proper authorization and selling them online shortly after she began working at the pawn store. Despite the fact that Ashley had initially hired her, their relationship quickly deteriorated, and Tressa was eventually fired. Ashley remained unconvinced and pointed to surveillance film as evidence, despite Tressa's assertions of innocence, which stated that she had been instructed to carry out the task by another individual. Tressa's protests were ignored by Ashley, who swiftly terminated her employment and emphasized the store's zero-tolerance stance regarding dishonesty. In addition, Tressa was taken away by the police, but it was later announced that all accusations against her were dismissed. Family feud. There was a persistent family conflict among the Golds, which was a significant factor that led to the bankruptcy of Hardcore Pawn, as it was obviously detrimental to the company's profitability. At the American Jewelry and Loan Pawn Shop, Peter, who was a seller, had the hope of selling the watch that belonged to his grandfather, which was a valuable treasure. With the intention of purchasing the watch as well as other products, Ashley engaged into the negotiation. Peter's initial request for $3,000 was based on the fact that he needed the money to pay for his children's education. Peter ultimately turned down Ashley's final offer of $2,400, despite the fact that she persisted in negotiating with him. The occurrence left an impression on Seth, who voiced his concern regarding Ashley's attitude, expressing his fear that it could potentially damage relationships with customers. The more he observed Ashley mistreating clients and underestimating their needs, the more concerned he became. The friction between the siblings reached a point when they argued in public about a baseball that had been autographed. This caused a client to storm out of the establishment, deeming them to be unprofessional. As a result of Les's irritation with their behavior, they were admonished for ignoring their responsibilities. He cautioned Ashley and Seth about their behavior, highlighting the fact that engaging in such behavior could result in severe repercussions. Upon being requested to replenish the television shelf, Ashley responded by stating that young children were incapable of performing inventory, as Les had previously referred to their behavior as being juvenile. The decision was made by Les to take care of the assignment himself, enlisting Bobby J., a dependable worker. After some time had passed, Les finally hit his breaking point as the tensions continued to rise. Following yet another heated argument, he abruptly ordered Ashley and Seth home for the day from the office. In the end, Les experienced a severe health crisis as a result of the stress that he experienced as a result of handling the incessant arguing of his children. His collapse, which occurred as he was lifting televisions, prompted an emergency reaction. As Les's health continued to deteriorate, paramedics arrived promptly and began providing care. As Seth conveyed his profound concern for his father, he expressed his amazement regarding the circumstances. Despite the fact that Les had always been regarded as a rock of support, he was now lying powerless. The fact that Seth and Ashley had a disagreement before their father's loss of consciousness was a source of sadness for Ashley. During the time that Les was recuperating, the future of the shop was in jeopardy, and it was dependent on whether Ashley and Seth were able to redeem themselves or face the repercussions of their actions. Reckless employees. The pawn business's financial losses brought about by careless staff led to bankruptcy. Les had to hold a staff meeting since she was so unhappy with staff performance. He bemoaned poor attitudes and spoke of repercussions should standards not be reached. Rich, a longtime employee, especially offended Les by mishandling negotiations and disregarding job responsibilities. Les' unwillingness to fire anyone, notwithstanding his missteps, caused the shop to suffer a major loss. Feeling deceived by Rich's actions and noticing a pattern of neglect, they chose to call off his employment. Rich had been a devoted worker for 25 years. Hence, this choice stunned some people. Les's children and staff, Seth and Ashley, convinced their father to change his mind about dismissing Rich under rigorous criteria. Rich was caught once more, though, disregarding his obligations shortly after this respite, therefore validating Les's choice. Rich, who felt unfairly treated despite his employment, battled with Les and finally departed the store, angrily remarking on their damaged relationship. Uncertain whether he still had a job following the latest upheaval, Rich hesitantly went back to the pawn store the next day. Surprised and curious, Seth and Ashley welcomed him as he headed into Les's office. Renowned for his exacting standards, Les fixed Rich. Rich spoke out during an uncomfortable quiet, expressing regret and a real apology. Les listened austerely, his countenance incomprehensible. But Les took his apologies when Rich at last finished. Still, he insisted on knowing why he ought to offer him another shot. Rich vowed, determined, to work non-stop with Seth to transform the store to unprecedented standards. He told Les his past misdeeds were behind him, emphasizing that it would be Rich's last chance. Les consented to offer him another opportunity following a protracted pause. Rich left Les's office resolved yet also feeling relief. He understood he had to show himself and win people's trust again. But soon after, the memory of this event faded and fresh conflict emerged when Seth, the manager, found his staff slinking off during business hours. When John, an employee, listed a rare Mickey Mantle painting online for just $400 instead of $3,000, his annoyance peaked. John seemed not to give the implication any thought. Apart from a significant financial loss, the mistake set off a fight between Seth and Les on the performance and management problems in the store. Les insisted on keeping profitability and output and chastised Seth for the oversight errors causing such losses. Though Seth defended John as a generally dependable worker deserving of another chance, Les was relentless in his demand for responsibility. For the expensive mistake, he believed John ought to be let go right away. But Seth paused, caught between the pragmatic pressures of operating the company and allegiance to his colleagues. Following a heated argument, Seth grudgingly decided to let John once more prove himself. But John shocked everyone by leaving right when it appeared Seth was offering an olive branch. Following events, Les voiced his dissatisfaction with Seth's handling of the matter and underlined the need of more effective management and forceful action. Ashley dealt with slinking staff members on her own front as well. She had to calm clients' resentment about reportedly paying one employee while others cut in line. Ashley tried to warn Les and Seth about the problem, but they discounted her worries and left her to look at it by herself. Ashley asked staff and clients carefully, but she didn't find any leads until one unhappy client detailed the involved employee. She finally confronted Anton, who first denied it, but subsequently acknowledged taking money to enable consumers bypass the line. Furious at Anton's behavior, Ashley expected her father to respond decisively. But Les refused to fire Anton, which confused Ashley and infuriated Seth as he felt Anton's behavior justified removal. Unlike Seth, Les chose to give Anton another chance. Given how swiftly others had been let go for less serious violations, Seth contended that lying and mistreating consumers should have resulted in instant dismissal. Les finally decided to suspend Anton rather than simply fire him, which added more stress to the family and the business. Seth insisted that Anton had betrayed confidence and should not be let back in, order to draw attention to a gulf in their ideas on loyalty and commercial consequences. Bad deals. Poor agreements significantly contributed to Hardcore Pawn's collapse. In the Season 7 episode titled Watch Your Back, Seth and Ashley expressed their frustration with their father's imprudent choices, ranging from taxidermy transactions to superfluous dioramas. The situation deteriorated when Les was misled by a habitual patron. Les sold a distinctive Breitling watch to a collector for $42,000, but the collector failed to fulfill the agreement. The buyer dispatched 130 containers containing 40,000 watch bands to American Jewelry and Loan instead of remitting the $42,000 payment. In subsequent episodes, Les encountered difficulties in selling the watch bands at a reduced price of $2 each. He ultimately achieved a break-even point after selling many autographed editions on the shop's website and locating a wholesaler who purchased the majority of the watch bands. However, Les did not derive any lessons from this error. He undertook a precarious action in another episode by acquiring a 1941 Chevrolet for $5,800. It was regarded as one of the show's most precarious acquisitions. 3 years later, the antique car, remaining in superb shape with a meticulously maintained engine, was increasingly becoming a source of frustration for Les's children, Seth and Ashley. The vehicle was utilizing important storage space in their shop and evidently immobilizing capital. Resolute in addressing the problem, Les concluded it was time to sell the vehicle. An advantageous chance emerged when two automotive aficionados from a Detroit automobile exhibition visited their workshop. Fortunately, Les capitalized on the opportunity and completed a transaction, ultimately selling the Chevy for an impressive $14,500. Despite yielding an approximate 150% profit, this sale depleted the shop's resources for 3 years. Seth and Ashley noted that this transaction did not much ease their storage issue, since other unsold vehicles persisted in occupying their space. Notwithstanding their apprehensions of Les's unfavorable transactions, Les continued to take pride in his choice. The substantial return from the sale of the 1941 Chevrolet affirmed his risk-taking strategy, albeit not fully resolving the persistent storage challenges. Thank you for seeing this video. We trust you found it informative and pleasurable. To acquire further information on your preferred celebrity, click on the link that appears on your screen.